Okay, so today we're going to talk about the top 10 most valuable lessons that I've learned from owning 108 tube amps. Yep, 108. I said it. And I'm going to include a link to my amp log so you can see for yourself just how mental I actually am and what a crazy journey that I've been on. So I will probably make another video describing how I got into amps and what led me to this insane wormhole of gear acquisition syndrome. But today I'm going to just focus on the 10 most valuable lessons that I've learned. So starting with number one, and I should preface this by saying that this video is geared more towards not really beginners, but people who have a passion for amplifiers and guitars and all that stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this isn't really aimed at the really young kid just starting out. It's more aimed towards the serious musician who is pretty sure they're a gear whore / gear slut. And yeah, so I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it will. So the first lesson that I want to talk about is cutting corners and not spending the time to save money for the amp that you want. So a huge reason for my having so many amps is I'm not rich. I never was rich. I know a lot of my friends seem to think I am because of some of the high-end amps that I've owned, but I'm not. And a lot of the insanity was rushing and not really spending the time to, let's say, save up for, like I'd been putting off buying a Friedman amp for a long, long time because they're so expensive. Well, so expensive. You get what you pay for. I think they're worth it. So my whole point is not to rush and cut corners and settle for something that is still somewhat expensive. I'll use an example. Say a Marshall 40-watt DSL combo in Canada. New, you're looking at almost $1,000, almost $1,000. You can buy them used for around $600-700. But you can also buy a used 20-watt Friedman Dirty Shirley head or a Friedman Runt for around $1,200 Canadian if you keep your eyes open on the used market. I'm a big fan of Kijiji. So there you go. There's an example. So you've got this Marshall, decent amp, but for those of us that are really into amps, a Friedman amp is going to sound way, way better. Any of my friends that have heard my Friedman Dirty Shirley 40-watt, which is right there, plugged into a 4x12, you compare that to any Marshall out of a store nowadays, and it will eat it for breakfast. So that's just a reality. Anyway, so that's the first rule. Don't cut corners. Save your money. Buy the gear that you really want, and don't just settle for something cheaper because you're in a rush to fill the gas, the gear acquisition syndrome. Okay. Number two, when you get that amp, spend time with it and don't rush to conclusions, and don't think that it sucks if you're not happy with it immediately. There's a whole bunch of reasons why it may suck. You might not be EQing it right. You might not have it plugged into the right cab, the right speakers. You might not have the right guitar. Some amps like Mesa Boogies have a steeper learning curve. The manuals are quite in depth. There's a lot to know and understand about the gain levels and all that good stuff. So I would really recommend spending time with your gear, and don't just assume that it sucks if it doesn't sound great the moment you have it. Third rule, and this is specifically about amps, learn as much as you can about non-master volume amps versus master volume amps, and learn about the differences of that, because it's a really big deal. It's a huge deal because if you have a non-master volume amp, generally you're going to have to crank it to insanely loud levels for it to sound good. Yes, you can use an attenuator or a low box, and well, we're getting to that shortly. But I guess the lesson really is to understand the difference between, let's say, vintage style plexis, which are non-master volume amps, and amps that have a master volume that allow you to crank the gain but manage the volume and play at bedroom levels. Big reason why I'm a huge Friedman fan is I found they've got some of the best master volumes I've ever heard. So you can get pretty wicked kick-ass tones at manageable levels by using the master volume. So that's the third lesson. The fourth lesson, speaking of non-master volume amps, and I've owned quite a few, including Germino Club 40, Marshall JMP, a 20-watt Marshall Plexi, the 20-watt reissue, a Dr. Dan JTM 50, to name a few. And my experience has been that they only sound great when they're cranked. And I have tried attenuators. I've got a Fryette Power Station right there. Easily one of the world's best rated attenuators. And I found it just sucks tone. Attenuators suck tone. It's just not the same. Yes, you can crank that Plexi to 12 or that Fender Twin, crank it and get a decent sound, but I found attenuators, they just suck. They really do. I'm sure I'll have a lot of people disagree with me there, but that's just my experience. So what I'm trying to say is, don't assume that attenuator is going to fix all your problems, because it just might create more problems, and you might be stuck with a really expensive non-master volume amp that you can't use. So my best advice is to try out some attenuators, borrow one from a buddy, and then you'll learn all about that. So that leads me to my fifth lesson. And I wish I had known a lot more about attenuators, load boxes, IRs, and that whole subject in general before I went down the amplifier wormhole. So a lot of these lessons that I'm sharing with you really have to do with educating yourself. And the more you know about all this stuff going into this, the better informed you're going to be, and you will save a ton of money. So a lot of my idiocy and stupidity was really because I was ignorant on the subject of amps and tube amps and attenuators and master versus non-master volume and all that stuff, and just how insanely loud a tube amp can be, including a 1 watt. I had a 1 watt JTM head, and in my office it was insanely loud. So yeah, learn as much as you can about attenuators and load boxes, like the Fryette Power Station, the Sur Reactive Load, Torpedo Live, Torpedo Studio. They've all got features that the other unit won't do, and some have some of these features and some have others, and it's a whole world unto itself. But if you just spend a few hours understanding what they are and what they do, it'll really, really help you figure out the best approach. For example, you may have your heart set on a vintage Plexi. Well, I can guarantee you will need an attenuator or reactive low box or something to tame it. You can't even play in most clubs without an attenuator. So learn about that. Rule number 6, the sixth lesson I've learned is to understand how cabinets and speakers affect your amp tone. They are essentially the EQ of your amp, post power amp EQ. It's the most dramatic change that you can make to your amp is by changing the speaker and cabinet combination. You might just need to change the speaker, but different cabinets sound different. A 1x12 is not going to sound like a 2x12, and it's not going to sound like a 4x12. It's not just about 4 speakers versus 2 versus 1, and 4 speakers being louder than the 1 speaker. And I'm no sound engineer and I'm no expert on this, but here I am with the hands talking like Trump. We love Trump here in Canada. Actually, no, we don't. Sorry, I digress. Yeah, so for example, Mesa 2x12 closed back is going to sound really different to a 1x12 open back. Closed back cabs generally will give you a more focused, punchier sound. Open back cabs will give you a fuller, kind of 3-dimensional sound. So the shape of the cab is extremely important. And so if you're going for like a, Uber chugga chugga gent 7th string heavy metal kind of sound, I would actually recommend a Mesa 2x12. Or a Mesa 4x12 closed back cab. So, and speakers, extremely important. Marshall tends to include really crappy speakers in their combos. And I've got a video on my channel showing myself the Marshall DSL-40 combo going through my 4x12 with greenbacks and V30s, and I've got a lot of positive feedback on that video. The sound was friggin' incredible compared to, say, the stock speaker that they put. Just changing that Marshall combo to a greenback, which is what they used to include with a lot of older cabs, or replacing your 4x12 that's got G12 T75s. A lot of people love them. I can't stand them. You might really, instead of having to change your amp, you can radically change your sound by replacing the speakers with like 4 greenbacks. Or what I did is I mixed greenbacks and V30s. I found that was a really good balance of the high-end harshness of V30s and the rock and roll growl of the greenbacks. Bogner and Friedman also have taken that approach in some of their cabinets. So yeah, that's number 6. Learn about speakers and cabinets. So speakers, Alnico versus, ceramic, all the types of speakers, the brand, Celestion versus Scumbacks, it could go on and on. So number 7, don't believe all the hype on the interweb just because a whole bunch of fanboys are jumping up and down about something. Trust your own ears. I'll use an example. Millions of people out there on the internet love V30s. If I have just V30s, I can't stand the sound of them. So, I bought a cab with 4 V30s, and sure enough, I ended up hating it a while later. Why? Because I kind of listened to the hype on the interweb. Use your own ears and go for what you like, not what other people say you should have or what works best. So trial and error, but basically try to rent a cab or borrow a cab that's got the speaker you want. It could save you a lot of heartache down the line. Number 7. Sorry, that was 7. Number 8 is, if I could do it all over again, and let's say you're kind of starting out and you're into a whole bunch of different sounds like I am, I'm never going to be a 1 guitar guy or a 1 amp guy. There's a reason why I've got a Friedman Dirty Shirley, which is a Marshall style, modern Marshall style amp. I've got my EVH for my, wanking Eddie Van Halen screaming solo tones. I've got a vintage 1965 Fender Twin for when I just want to get that vintage sound. But my whole point is, if I could go back in time, I would have gotten even a standard reissue Fender Twin, and I would have experimented with pedals. And I would use pedals to color my tone instead of buying amps for every tone, because it's 1,000 times more expensive going the amp route when the pedals are getting so good these days. So good. I bought a Vertex Trainwreck pedal. It's called the what's it called? The T-Drive. It's a Trainwreck amp in a box, in a pedal. And I plugged that Trainwreck pedal through my Fender Twin, and it's like one of the best tones I've ever gotten. Like, absolutely incredible. So, you know, you want that Dumble sound? Go get the Dude by J Rocket Design. Incredible pedal. I absolutely love it. I've tried a whole bunch. Anyways, I don't want to talk about Dumble pedals. That could be a whole video in itself. What I'm trying to say is, you could get that JTM 45 amp in a pedal. Love Pedal makes an amazing one that I've owned. You can get the Fender Bassman in a pedal. So if you've got a Fender Twin, which is known to be a super clean amp, you could buy, you know, for $1,000, you could probably get at least 5 or 6 brand new and 10 used different amps, and have them all lined up and have an awesome range of tones and really good quality tone, without having to spend thousands and thousands on those amps. For example, a Trainwreck amp will run you, I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000, if you can even find one. So yeah, for those of you that can't afford a Friedman amp, get the Friedman B pedal. Absolutely fantastic. One of the best high gain pedals out there. Plug that into a nice clean amp, even a Fender Bassman, or even a Marshall amp on a clean channel. Marshalls generally have very, very, very good clean channels. So yeah, pedals. If I could go back in time, I would not have gone down the amp wormhole like I did. I would have gotten a really great, clean, big amp, sounding amp, and used pedals to color my tone. So that's my 8th lesson. Number 9, don't rely on YouTube to determine how a piece of gear is going to sound, because by the time it gets to your house, in your room, with your hands, with your guitar and your pick and your cables and your pedals, it's not going to sound the same as it did in the video. Guaranteed. There's many people out there that have fallen for this, and you buy it, you see a piece of shiny gear on YouTube, you think it's going to change your life, make you sound like a rock star or whatever, and no, it doesn't. So again, try to rent it, try to borrow it, do whatever you can. I can't tell you the amount of amps that I've bought just from whatever people saying, oh, you got to get this. If you're trying to get that sound, you're going to love this amp. And then, you know, I spend a few thousand to get that friggin' amp into my country. You know, I'm in Ottawa, Canada. We don't have the selection that you guys in the States do, or in like London, England. I've only got one store here in Ottawa that even carries Friedman amps. I'm lucky to even have that. But they also, I don't have access to tons of other amps that other people might have access to. So it's always like a huge leap of faith, spending a few $1,000s on an amp, buying it from some guy on the other side of the planet or some store, getting it home, and then you plug in, and it's like, oh man. But that kind of gets back to my other point that I made previously, also to spend time with it before you decide that you don't like it. At least spend a couple weeks tweaking the hell out of it. Try it with different cabs, different speakers. But to get back to my point, don't base your purchases on YouTube, even though I know many of us do. Try not to. That's all. A lot of those videos are done in DAWs, so the recording software that the person's using, they won't tell you this, but they'll often apply post EQ, compression, all kinds of stuff to fatten and make the sound a lot better. So you're kind of getting suckered into something, you know? So here's my final tip, the 10 biggest lesson that I've learned from owning 108 amps, and that is to practice a lot more and spend a lot less time obsessing about gear. I am so guilty of this, and it's really been bugging me lately because I know I have a lot of potential as a guitarist, but I'm always spending my time buying and selling gear and flipping amps and doing videos on amps, and really at the end of the day I'm going round and round in circles, spending thousands of dollars on gear, and I'm not becoming a better guitar player. And in the end, what is this really about? Like, how important is that gear? So yeah, lately I'm making a point of practicing every day, 10 to 15 minutes a day. I'm cracking open my theory books, even if it's just practicing the major scale shape up and down the neck, picking exercises, whatever. But focus more on playing and less on gear. And that's pretty much it. So there you have it, my 10 most valuable lessons that I've learned from owning 108 amps. If you like my channel and my videos, please hit subscribe. There's a little bell icon to get notifications each time I upload if you're interested. And I would love to hear what you guys would like to see videos on. Maybe videos that other YouTube gear guys aren't doing. You've probably noticed that my videos are generally not very scripted, and well, they're not at all. And I've gonna try to put a little more structure to my videos and make them a little more meaningful and a little more focused. So there you go. Hope you enjoy it. Have a nice day. Bye. Cheers from Canada, Ottawa.